Every Monday evening at exactly 9 o'clock, my son and daughter-in-law would knock on my door. They always asked the same three scripted questions, and the last one was always, "Is anyone home with you tonight?" I always answered truthfully, "Just me." But last Monday, some strange instinct made me lie. Told them I was completely alone, concealing the fact that my friend was asleep down the hall. That one unthinking lie saved everything. I had nearly lost my home, my savings, my freedom, my mind to a chilling plot that had been quietly unfolding inside my own house for 18 months. This story begins gently, but it will not leave you the same. Before I tell you what happened that Monday evening in the October of 2023, you need to understand why I never questioned the ritual, why I never once thought that a doorbell at 9 o'clock could be anything other than love. I'm 60 years old, 2 years retired after carrying mail for the U.S. Postal Service for 30 years. And I'm standing in the backyard my wife Lorraine left behind. She passed 4 years ago, from a stroke sudden and clean, the way she would have chosen if anyone had thought to ask her. Nobody asked me either. The tomato plants she'd put in that last spring still push up through the soil every year, and I water them at dawn because it feels like the only right thing to do. My routine is simple. Welcome back to His Hidden Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we go any further, if you feel moved by what you hear, drop a word in the comments. It genuinely means something to know you're listening, and while you're there, tell me, is it morning where you are, afternoon, or are you up late tonight? I always find that the late-night listeners hear a story like this one differently. A quick note before we begin, some elements of this story have been shaped for audio storytelling, and any resemblance to specific individuals is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. Tea at 6 blood pressure medication, 1 small white pill with breakfast, then the garden. I live in a modest red brick house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The kind of place a postal worker can afford after 3 decades of steady paychecks and a wife who knew how to make every dollar count. The house is worth about $485,000 now, though I didn't pay half that 30 years ago. It's mine, paid off. That matters. Lorraine and I had 1 son, Colt, 32 years old, now married to a woman named Nadine, who's 30 and works part-time at a dental office. Colt used to work in logistics for a freight company until he was let go last year. They've had a hard time since then. I understood that. Money trouble makes people desperate, makes them reach for things they wouldn't normally reach for. But I didn't see it coming, not even close. Colt and Nadine started visiting every Monday evening about 18 months ago, spring of last year, April, around Easter. They'd ring the doorbell at exactly 9 o'clock, and I'd let them in, and we'd sit in the living room for 20 minutes, maybe 30. It felt good. After Lorraine died, the house went quiet in a way that made the walls seem farther apart. So, when Colt said they wanted to check in on me regularly, I was grateful. I told my neighbor Doris Cavanaugh about it one afternoon, while she was out trimming her rose bushes. Doris is 60, same as me, with 3 grown children who never call. She looked at me with something close to envy and said, "You're lucky, Gerald. That kind of attention is rare." I thought so too. I thought that losing his mother had made Colt attentive. Grief sometimes does that. It shakes you awake, reminds you that the people you love aren't permanent. I figured the Monday visits were his way of making sure I didn't fall through the cracks the way some widowers do, the ones who stop eating right or forget their medication, or just sit in the dark until somebody finds them weeks later. The first Monday they came, Colt asked 3 questions, always in the same order. "Did you take your medication today, Dad?" "Yes," I said this morning, with breakfast. "Are you eating well?" "I am. Made a pot of chili yesterday. Still have some left." Then the third question, the one I didn't think twice about until much later. "Is anyone here with you tonight?" "Just me," I said. Nadine smiled at that, a small smile, the kind you offer when you hear the answer you were hoping for. Then she'd say, "Do you need anything from the kitchen, Gerald?" And Colt would stand up and say he needed water and head down the hallway to the bathroom every single time. I figured it was just nerves. Colt always had a weak bladder even as a kid. Couldn't sit through a movie without needing a break. So I never questioned it when he excused himself on every visit. Nadine would stay with me in the living room chatting about work or the weather, or some friend of hers I'd never laid eyes on, and Colt would wander back 5 minutes later, and they'd stay another 10 before heading out. The visits lasted 18 months, 78 Mondays in total, though I wasn't keeping count at the time. Looking back now, I can see the pattern plain as day. The precision of it, the repetition, the way the three questions never changed, the way Colt always went to the bathroom alone, the way Nadine always confirmed I was by myself before they arrived. But at the time, it just felt like love. You have to understand, for 18 months this pattern never wavered. Not once. Not when Colt came down with the flu in February and could barely stand upright. Not when Nadine's car broke down and they had to borrow a friend's. Not on holidays, not during rainstorms. Not the week the power went out across half of Tulsa. Every Monday, 9 o'clock exactly. 3 questions, bathroom, 20 minutes, goodbye. I was proud of it. I told Doris. I told the pharmacist when I went in for my refills. I told Clyde Whitmore, my best friend for 28 years, during one of our Sunday fishing trips. Your boy's got his head on straight, Clyde said. Not many kids that age think about their folks, I agreed. I had no idea that the medication I swallowed every morning wasn't the blood pressure pill my doctor had prescribed. I had no idea that the small round tablet in the white bottle with my name on the label had been carefully swapped out during one of those bathroom visits, replaced with something else entirely. I had no idea that for 18 months I'd been slowly dying. Not until the Monday evening Clyde stayed over. 18 months every Monday at 9 o'clock until Clyde stayed over. Clyde Whitmore drove down from Broken Arrow that Sunday afternoon with a knee that hadn't healed right and no idea he was about to save my life. He's 61 a year older than me, and we'd worked side by side for 28 years, carrying mail for the Postal Service before we both retired. Clyde took his pension and moved 40 minutes north to Broken Arrow, where his daughter lives. That Sunday, he'd driven down for a hardware store run and called to ask if I wanted lunch. We ate barbecue, and when Clyde stood up to leave, I noticed the way he favored his left leg. "Knee still bothering you?" I asked. 3 months since the surgery, he said. "My leg's killing me from the drive down." "I've got the spare room," I said. "Stay the night. Drive home tomorrow when the roads are clear." Clyde accepted. We watched a game that evening, and he turned in early. Before I went to bed, I thought about calling Colt to mention Clyde was here, but then I thought, it's just one night. Clyde would probably leave Monday morning anyway, but Monday came, and Clyde's knee was worse. "I can't press the brake without wanting to scream," he said after breakfast. "I'll head out Tuesday morning. That okay?" Of course it was okay. I made dinner chicken and rice. Nothing fancy. And Clyde sat with me at the kitchen table. We talked about the golf tournament we'd watched on TV that weekend, about his daughter's new job in Oklahoma City, about the weather turning cooler. Normal conversation, easy and comfortable, the way 28 years of friendship makes things easy. At 8:50 I cleared the dishes. Clyde asked if I needed help. I told him no, told him to rest the knee, and he limped back to the guest room to lie down. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Colt stood on the front step with Nadine beside him, both of them smiling the way they always smiled. And for a moment, everything felt normal, the same as it had felt 77 times before. "Hey, Dad," Colt said. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside. Colt closed the door behind him. The ceremony began the way it always began, the 3 questions in their fixed order. "Did you take your medication today, Dad?" "This morning," I said with breakfast. "Are you eating well?" "Had chicken and rice for dinner. Plenty left if you want some." Then the 3rd question, the one I'd answered the same way for 18 months. "Is anyone home with you tonight?" I opened my mouth to say what I always said. "Just me." But something stopped me. Not a thought exactly, more like an instinct, the kind of animal awareness that makes you step back from the curb half a second before a car runs the red light. Actually, no. I lied, my voice steady. Clyde drove down from Broken Arrow. His knee was giving him hell, so he's sleeping down the hall right now. The moment those words left my mouth, I watched something terrifying shift in Colt's face. His eyes went wide, and his skin drained to a sickly pale gray. He wasn't ready for this. His gaze snapped immediately to the shoe rack by the front door, landing on Clyde's work boots. Nadine caught her breath, her hand going still on his wrist. I'll get some water," Colt stammered, completely rattled. He moved toward the hallway in a panic. Because of my lie, he assumed the bathroom was a trap, and he rushed carelessly through the dark, a blunder that would cost them everything. They both smiled at me, and the ceremony continued exactly as it always had. Except now, I could feel the weight of that lie sitting in the room with us like a 4th person. Nadine walked to the living room and settled into the chair across from mine, the same chair she'd sat in 77 times before. Colt headed down the hallway toward the bathroom, his footsteps soft on the carpet. The house fell into its familiar rhythm. Me and Nadine in the living room, Colt somewhere else for however long it took. Nadine folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with that warm, concerned expression she always wore. "You look a bit pale tonight, Gerald," she said, her eyes tracking the movement of my hands. "Are you sure you're keeping up with your fluids in this dry autumn weather?" "I'm doing just fine, Nadine," I replied, holding a calm smile in place. Just the usual fatigue from working out back. The yard takes more out of me these days. "Well, you mustn't push yourself too hard," she said softly. "Colt and I worry about you being here on your own when the seasons change. We talked about gardening, about the grocery store, jacking up prices on everything about some mutual acquaintance I barely remembered ever mentioning months before. Normal conversation, the kind you have when you're filling time more than sharing anything real. But I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. Twice during that conversation. Once while we were talking about the grocery store. Once when she asked about my neighbor Doris, Nadine's eyes flicked toward the hallway just for a second. A quick glance the way you check a clock when you're waiting on something to finish. I'd never counted the minutes before, not across 77 Monday visits. But sitting there with Nadine making small talk, I found myself counting. 1 minute, 2, 3. The air conditioner cycled on with a low hum. 4 minutes. 5. Nadine asked if I needed anything picked up from the grocery store. 6, 7. I told her I was fine. Thank you. 8. 9 minutes. I'd never counted them before, never had a reason to. But something about that night made the minutes feel longer, heavier, like they were filling up with something I didn't yet have a name for. Colt came back down the hallway. His shoulders looked looser than when he'd left. He gave me that easy, boyish brightness, like there wasn't a thing wrong in the world. "We should get going, Dad," he said. I stood up. Nadine stood up. We walked to the front door together, the three of us moving through the ritual we'd worn smooth over 18 months. "Love you," Colt said, and pulled me into a hug at the door. "Love you too," I said. Nadine hugged me next, quick and warm. "Take care of yourself, Gerald." "I will." They walked to their car. I stood in the doorway and watched them back out of the driveway, the taillights shrinking away down the street. It was 9:25. The visit had lasted exactly 25 minutes, same as always. I closed the door and went to bed. Clyde told me the next morning what had happened at 2:15. His knee woke him. The pain had been worsening at night, throbbing in rhythm with his pulse. That night, it wouldn't let him rest. He needed the bathroom, needed to walk off some of the ache, and he got up in the dark without switching on the hallway light because he didn't want to disturb me. The spare room was at the end of the hall. The bathroom was the second door on the left, maybe 15 feet away. Clyde knew the layout from the quick tour I'd given him when he first arrived Saturday. He moved carefully, one hand trailing along the wall, for balance, his bad leg dragging slightly. Halfway to the bathroom, he stepped on something, small, hard, round. It rolled under his bare foot, and his knee buckled from the jolt of it, a sharp spike of pain that made him grab the wall. He bent down slowly, feeling along the carpet in the dark, until his fingers closed around it. A pill. He carried it with him into the bathroom, shut the door, turned on the nightlight above the sink. The small one I kept, plugged in so I wouldn't stumble if I got up in the night. The light was dim, barely enough to see by, but it was enough. Clyde held the pill beneath the glow, turning it slowly between his thumb and forefinger. Round white, a faint score line across the middle that caught the dim light. Nothing like the pills in my bathroom cabinet. Nothing like the oval blood pressure tablets I swallowed every morning with breakfast. The ones stamped with a tiny logo on one side. Clyde told me he held that pill under the nightlight for a full minute. Round where mine were oval, white where mine were white, wrong where everything should have been right. He set it carefully on the edge of the sink right next to the soap dish where it wouldn't roll away or fall into the drain. Then he used the bathroom, washed his hands, and walked back to the spare room, his knees still throbbing, his mind moving faster than it had in months. He didn't sleep again that night. Clyde told me he lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to work out what it meant that there was a pill on my bathroom floor that wasn't mine, trying to recall the last time he'd walked that hallway Sunday evening when he first arrived. The floor had been clear then. He was certain of it. The pill had appeared sometime between Sunday evening and Monday night. Monday night, when Colt had walked down that hallway alone, gone to the bathroom for 9 minutes, while Nadine sat with me in the living room, talking about weather and tomatoes. Clyde held that wrongness in his mind until the sky outside began turning gray with dawn. Then he got up, got dressed, and waited for me to wake so he could show me what he'd found. Tuesday morning over breakfast, Clyde set the pill on the kitchen counter between us, and neither of us touched our eggs after that. I'd woken at 6:30 like I always did, made coffee scrambled eggs with a little cheese the way Lorraine used to make them. Clyde came into the kitchen at 7 o'clock, moving slowly because of the knee, his face creased with exhaustion in a way that told me he hadn't slept. He sat down at the table without saying a word. I poured him coffee. We ate in silence for maybe 3 minutes. Then he reached into his pocket and set the pill on the counter next to the salt shaker right between us, where the light from the window fell across it. Small, round, white, unassuming, the way dangerous things often are. I found it on the bathroom floor, Clyde said. Right outside the bathroom door, like somebody dropped it in a hurry and didn't notice in the dark around 2:15 this morning when my knee woke me up. I've been sitting with it since dawn, Gerald trying to find a reason it should be there. I picked it up and turned it slowly in the morning light, the same way Clyde had turned it under the bathroom nightlight hours before. It was cool against my skin, smooth except for that faint score line across the middle. A manufactured thing, precise and deliberate. "This isn't mine," I said. Clyde nodded. "I know, my pills are oval," I said. "This one's round, smaller." "I know," Clyde said again. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." I stood up and walked to the bathroom, Clyde following behind me at a slower pace. I opened the medicine cabinet above the sink and took out my 7-day pill organizer, the green plastic kind, with compartments for each day of the week. Tuesday's compartment still held the morning dose. One pill oval in white stamped with a tiny logo I'd never bothered to memorize. I brought the organizer back to the kitchen and set it on the counter next to the round pill. We both looked at them. Oval, round, large, small, mine, not mine. I held that pill between my thumb and forefinger the way Clyde had held it under the nightlight, and I understood why he hadn't slept. Because once you see something like that, you can't unsee it, can't unknow it, can't go back to the version of the morning where it doesn't exist. "Where do you keep your medication?" Clyde asked, though he already knew the answer. "Bathroom cabinet," I said. "Same spot for 2 years, since Lorraine died and I started taking it. I filled the organizer every Sunday evening, set it on the shelf, and take one every morning with breakfast. And you've never dropped one. Never had a pill roll under the sink or end up on the floor." "No," I said. "I'm careful about it. The doctor told me missing doses was the most common mistake people made with blood pressure medication. So I got in the habit of being precise about it. Fill it Sunday. Take it with breakfast. Never missed a day." Clyde nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee cup, set it back down without drinking. "When's the last time you walked that hallway?" I asked. "Before last night." "Sunday evening," Clyde said. "When I first got here, you showed me the spare room, showed me the bathroom. The floor was clear then. I'm certain of it. So sometime between Sunday evening and Monday night," I said. "That's when this turned up." "Monday night," Clyde said quietly, after Colt came by. We sat there in heavy silence. The clock above the stove ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street. All the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning in Tulsa, Oklahoma, carrying on exactly as they always did, while the shape of my world changed completely. Clyde had the careful look of a man who knows something terrible but is still hoping he's wrong. I recognized it because I could feel that same expression settling onto my own face. "Walk me through it," Clyde said. "Monday night." "When did Colt arrive?" 9:00, I said. "Same as always." "And where did he go?" I wanted to lie. Wanted to steer the conversation somewhere else. Anywhere else, but Clyde had known me for 28 years, and there was no point pretending he hadn't already worked through this math in the dark hours before dawn. "Bathroom?" "He went to the bathroom," I said. "For water," he said. "Same as always." "How long?" 9 minutes, I said. I counted this time. Never had before, but last night I did. Clyde nodded again. "And Nadine in the living room with me talking about weather and gardening." "So, Colt was alone in the bathroom for 9 minutes, Clyde said. "Alone with your medication cabinet. How long do you sit at a kitchen table with your oldest friend before you say the thing out loud that you both already know? Before you give it a name, give it shape, make it real?" I wanted to wait forever. I wanted to sit there until the sun went down and rose again, until time ran backward and the pill vanished, and Clyde drove home to Broken Arrow, and Monday evening never happened. But that's not how time works. "Who else has been in that bathroom?" Clyde asked. "Besides you and Colt, Nadine uses it when she visits," I said. "But Monday night she stayed in the living room with me the whole time." She didn't go down the hallway. Before Monday, Clyde said, "In the past month, say who's been inside your house, I thought about it. Really thought, working backward through the weeks. Dora stopped by 2 weeks ago to borrow a ladder," I said, "but she didn't come inside. I brought it out to her from the garage. The mail carrier leaves packages on the front porch. The lawn service does the yard every Thursday, but they stay outside. So nobody inside the house," Clyde said. "No," I said. "Nobody comes into this house except me and Colt and Nadine." Clyde sat across from me, his coffee going cold, waiting for me to finish the math he'd already done in those dark hours before dawn. I set the pill back on the counter between us, and we both stared at it like it might explain itself if we gave it long enough. Clyde drove me to the pharmacy that Tuesday afternoon. We didn't talk much on the way. There wasn't much left to say that we hadn't already said at the kitchen table that morning, staring at a pill that had no business being there. Pauline Osgood held the pill up under the pharmacy light and examined it for 2 full minutes before she spoke. In that silence, I understood that whatever she was about to tell me would be worse than I'd imagined. She was 35, the pharmacist at the Peoria Avenue Community Pharmacy, where I'd been filling my prescriptions for 4 years. I'd watched her go from intern to full pharmacist, watched her handle medications with the careful precision of someone who understood that pills weren't just chemicals, they were trust made tangible. She set the pill on the counter under the magnifying lamp and adjusted the light. "This is a diuretic," she said. "High-dose furosemide, but someone removed the original label. You can see the adhesive residue here along the edge, and the white coating isn't standard for this medication. It was deliberately chosen to match something else. Match what I asked, though I already knew. Your blood pressure medication," Pauline said. She pulled up my prescription history on her computer. "You take amlodipine 5 milligrams, white oval tablets. This pill is white and round, but in a weekly organizer and dim bathroom light, they'd be easy to mix up if you weren't looking closely." Clyde stood beside me, his hand resting on the counter for balance because his knee was still giving him trouble. He didn't say a word. "What would happen?" I asked slowly. "If someone took this instead of their blood pressure medication?" The pharmacy was quiet. Somewhere in the back, a phone rang twice and stopped. The fluorescent lights hummed. "How long would it take?" I said before symptoms showed up. Pauline explained, her eyes carrying a dark, grave concern. "The first few months, your body compensates well enough to mask the danger. But by July or August, the progressive potassium depletion would begin mimicking irreversible dementia. By October, any physician would have thoroughly documented those symptoms as severe cognitive decline." She said it carefully, the way people choose words when they know the alternative but won't name it directly. "Cardiac complications," she said. "In severe cases, arrhythmia, heart failure. And because the symptoms develop gradually, they often get attributed to age or underlying conditions rather than medication interference." "Would it show up in an autopsy?" Clyde asked quietly. Pauline glanced at him, then at me. "Probably not. Low potassium can be fatal, but unless someone specifically tested for it and thought to examine the medication history, it would most likely be ruled natural causes, especially in a patient already on cardiac medication." I sat down in the chair they kept beside the blood pressure machine. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. "This isn't something that ends up in a pill organizer by accident, Mr. Pruitt," Pauline said. I thanked her. Clyde thanked her. We walked out to the parking lot and sat in Clyde's car for 10 minutes before either of us could speak. "What do you want to do?" Clyde asked finally. "I need to think," I said. He drove me home. I told him I'd call him in the morning. He looked at me the way a man looks when he doesn't want to leave you alone, but his knee was bad, and he had a long drive back to Broken Arrow ahead of him. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," I said. I sat at the kitchen table until 2 o'clock in the morning, with cold coffee I never drank. Running 18 months of Monday evenings, back through the lens that Pauline's words had put in front of me. Every detail reshapes itself when you finally understand what you've actually been looking at. The doorbell at 9 o'clock sharp, never early, never late. Because precision matters when you're working a plan. Those 3 questions every week were never about devotion. They were reconnaissance, careful and methodical. They weren't checking on my health. They were making sure the house was clear so Colt could swap my medication without interference. Making sure I wasn't getting help from neighbors or friends. Making sure the house was empty so Colt could have those 9 minutes alone in that bathroom every Monday. Switching pills in my organizer while Nadine sat with me in the living room talking about weather and tomatoes. I thought about Colt mentioning his job situation 6 months into the visits. I had asked how work was going, and he'd said something vague about working from home now. Nadine had touched his arm the way she'd touched it Monday night when he saw Clyde's boots, and the subject changed. He'd lost his job. I understood that now. Lost it before the visits started, or maybe right after. And instead of coming to me the way a son might come to his father, they'd started showing up every Monday at 9 o'clock with a diuretic and a plan. I'd never tallied my assets before, never had cause to. But sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning, I did the math. The house Lorraine and I bought in 1994 for $180,000 was worth $485,000 now, according to the property tax assessment. My pension from 30 years. With the Postal Service, the savings account, we'd built up slowly over decades, the thrift savings plan I'd been putting money into since they first offered it. $1.09 million. Enough to kill for if you were desperate enough. If you'd talked yourself into believing it was already yours. If waiting for your father to die on his own felt like too long to wait. Grief has a way of insulating you from seeing clearly. It wraps everything in soft focus, makes you generous with explanations. But at 2 in the morning, alone in the dark, that insulation burns away, and what you're left with is just the math. The cold equations of pills and visits and unanswered questions about why your son needed 9 minutes in a bathroom every Monday for 18 months. I sat at that kitchen table until the sky outside shifted from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning. By the time the first light came through the window and fell across Lorraine's tomato plants, I'd stopped reaching for any explanation that wasn't the one that had been forming in my mind all night. Cold, clear, and unforgivable. Wednesday morning, at 10 o'clock, I walked into Dr. Neil Cormack's clinic carrying a plastic bag of pill bottles, and one question I was terrified to hear answered. Dr. Cormack was 50 years old and thorough in the particular way of family doctors who've seen enough to know when something isn't right. He'd been my physician for 6 years since my regular doctor retired and the practice transferred all his patients over. He examined the pills I spread across his examination table without visible alarm, but I watched his face change when he held up the round white one. "This isn't yours," he said. "Not a question." "No," I said. "That's what I need to talk to you about." I told him about the Monday visits, about Clyde finding the pill on the bathroom floor, about what Pauline at the pharmacy had said. I kept my voice level and factual the way you describe a leak in the roof or a problem with the car. Something mechanical, something fixable. Dr. Cormack listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'd like to run some blood work," he said. "Today, if you're willing. I want to check your potassium levels, kidney function, a few other things." "What are you looking for?" "Evidence," he said simply. The blood draw took 5 minutes. The results took an hour. I sat in the waiting room and read the same magazine article 3 times without absorbing a word. At 11:30, Dr. Cormack called me back into his office. My chart was open on his desk, 3 years of medical history spread across the screen. He scrolled back to my last appointment in early October. "You mentioned fatigue at your October checkup," he said. "Memory lapses, some dizziness when you stood up too fast. I attributed it to your age and blood pressure adjustment. That was wrong of me. What did the blood work show?" "Your potassium levels are significantly low," Dr. Cormack said. "Not dangerously low at this moment. You're not in immediate medical distress, but low consistently over time. I pulled your records from the past several appointments. The pattern is there a gradual decline over the past year." The office was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. That would account for the fatigue, he continued. "The forgetfulness, the dizziness, all the symptoms you described at your October checkup. In older patients, progressive potassium depletion can present very similarly to early cognitive decline." "But I don't have cognitive decline," I said. "No," Dr. Cormack agreed. "You have low potassium because something has been interfering with your medication regimen." He said it carefully, the way doctors say things when they're asking about abuse or neglect, without using those words when they need you to hear the truth without having to speak the horror directly. "Mr. Pruitt," he said, "I need to ask you something. Has anyone else had access to your medications? Anyone who might have been," he paused, picking his words with the care of someone navigating a minefield. "Anyone who might have been managing them for you?" I didn't answer right away. Couldn't answer because saying it aloud would make it real, in a way it hadn't been yet. Not even at 2 in the morning at my kitchen table doing the math. "Yes," I said finally. Someone has had access. Dr. Cormack nodded slowly. I'm going to document this conversation in your medical record and write you a prescription for potassium supplements to correct the deficiency. But, Gerald, he used my first name, which he'd never done before. If someone has been deliberately interfering with your medications, that's not just a health concern. That's a crime. I know, I said. Do you need me to contact someone, Police Adult Protective Services? Not yet, I said. I need to think. He looked at me for a long moment, then made a note in my chart and printed out the prescription. Call me if anything changes, he said. Anything at all. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes after leaving the clinic. The engine was running. The air conditioning blew cold against my face. I just couldn't make myself pull out of that parking lot. Couldn't make myself drive home to the house where my son had spent 18 months poisoning me. One Monday evening at a time. Eventually I did because what else was there to do? At 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. Colt's name on the screen. I watched it ring 3 times before I picked up. Hey, Dad, he said, voice warm and familiar, the same voice that had asked me 3 questions every Monday for 18 months. Just checking in. How are you feeling today? Good, Colt, I said. My voice came out steady and even. Really good. Just been putting in some time in the garden this morning. You eating okay? Taking care of yourself, I am. Made a pot of stew yesterday. Still have plenty left. Good, Colt said. That's good. I was thinking Nadine and I could come by Saturday for lunch if you're free. Bring some sandwiches from that deli you like. That sounds nice. I said around noon. Noon works. We talked for another minute about nothing in particular. The weather, the Cowboys game on Sunday. Normal father-son conversation. Easy and comfortable. The way it had always been before I knew what I knew now. How do you sit in your living room and tell your son you love him when you don't just suspect you know that he's been poisoning you? You do it the same way you've done everything else for 60 years. One breath at a time. I should let you go, Colt said. Love you, Dad. Love you too, I said. And I meant it completely. That was the hardest part. Not the knowing, not the evidence sitting in my medical chart at Dr. Cormack's office. Not the potassium supplements I was supposed to start taking that night. The hardest part was that I could still mean those 3 words sitting there in my living room, looking out at Lorraine's garden, planning what came next. Thursday morning, I was watering Lorraine's tomatoes when Doris Kavanaugh called across the fence with the kind of offhand remark that becomes evidence the kind you don't know you need until you hear it. Garden's looking good, Gerald, she said, leaning on the chain link with her coffee mug in hand. Those tomatoes are coming in late this year. They are, I said. Climate's been strange. We talked about the weather for a minute, about the Bradford pear tree 2 houses down, dropping leaves too early about Mrs. Henderson's grandson moving back from Kansas City. Normal fence-line conversation on a Thursday morning in Tulsa. Then Doris said it. Your son and daughter-in-law are so devoted, she said. Every Monday evening like clockwork, I can practically set my watch by their headlights, turning into your driveway. I kept watering, kept the hose aimed at the base of the tomato plants the way Lorraine had shown me. Every Monday I asked. Oh, must be over a year now, Doris said. 18 months. I remember because it started around the middle of summer last year, and I thought how nice it was that they made such a regular thing of checking on you. My kids can barely remember to call. And it's always the same time I ask, keeping my voice easy. 9 o'clock, Doris said. Sometimes a minute before, sometimes a minute after, but 9 o'clock. I notice because that's when I'm usually settling in to watch my shows. I see the headlights come through the front window and think there's Colt right on schedule. She sipped her coffee completely unaware of what she'd just handed me. They stay about 20-30 minutes, she went on, then leave. Very punctual family, yours. I wish mine were half as reliable. I thanked her for noticing. Turned off the hose, went inside, and sat at the kitchen table for 10 minutes thinking. I had told myself they visited when they could, when their schedule allowed. But Doris had been watching not out of suspicion, just neighborly attention, and she just confirmed every single Monday for 18 months. External verification. A witness who could speak to the pattern, to the precision, to the fact that this wasn't occasional family care, but something systematic and deliberate. 18 months every Monday, 9 o'clock. Doris had been watching the whole time, not knowing she was documenting a crime. At noon, I went to the filing cabinet in the spare room and pulled out my will. I'd signed it 12 years ago, right after Lorraine died, when my lawyer said I needed to update my estate plan. I'd read it once signed, where he pointed and filed it away. I read it again now, slowly looking for something I wasn't sure I'd find. It took 3 pages to locate it. A single paragraph in the middle of section 4, buried in legal language about asset distribution and fiduciary responsibility. I read it twice to make sure I'd understood it correctly. Then I got in my truck and drove downtown to Gifford Aldcroft's office. Aldcroft was 55 years old and deliberate in the way of estate attorneys who've watched families tear themselves apart over money. He'd taken over my account when the previous lawyer retired, and I'd met with him maybe twice in the past 8 years for routine updates. He seemed surprised when his secretary called to say I was in the waiting room without an appointment, but he cleared 20 minutes in his schedule. I spread my will across his mahogany desk and pointed to section 4, paragraph 3. "This clause here," I said, "about incapacity. Explain it to me." Aldcroft put on his reading glasses and leaned forward. "Your estate is structured to transfer upon your death." "Yes," he said, "but there's also this clause or upon legal determination of incapacity. It's standard language in wills, designed to protect assets when someone develops dementia or loses the ability to manage their own affairs. How does that actually work? Incapacitation can be established through medical evaluation." Aldcroft said, "If 2 physicians agreed you could no longer handle your finances, make decisions about your care, or understand legal contracts, your designated beneficiary could petition for conservatorship. At that point, legal authority over your assets would transfer while you're still alive." I went very still. "So, my son wouldn't need me to die," I said slowly. "He'd just need me declared incompetent." Aldcroft studied me carefully. "That's correct, though I should say that families rarely use this clause that way. It's meant as a safeguard to ensure someone trustworthy steps in if dementia progresses." "Why are you asking?" I didn't answer him directly. "If someone were showing signs of cognitive decline," I said, "forgetfulness, confusion, dizziness, how long would those symptoms need to persist before a doctor might diagnose dementia?" "Months," Aldcroft said. "Typically 6 months to a year of documented symptoms before a formal diagnosis is made." Why I sat there in his office and realized that 14 months of fatigue and forgetfulness I'd chalked up to age, to grief, to adjusting to retirement, had been quietly constructing a legal case for my incompetence. Every forgotten name, every dizzy spell, getting up from a chair, every time I lost the thread, mid-sentence I'd been doing their work for them. They didn't need me dead. They just needed me to appear like I was losing my mind. Mr. Pruitt Aldcroft was watching me with concern now. "Is everything all right? Are you worried about your cognitive function? Because if you're experiencing symptoms, I'm fine," I said, just trying to understand something. I thanked him for his time, walked out to my truck, and sat in the parking garage for 5 minutes before I could bring myself to start the engine. The pills weren't intended to kill me, not directly. They were meant to make me weak, confused, and forgetful, to make me appear incompetent to build a medical record of cognitive decline across 14 months until 2 doctors would agree I was no longer fit to manage my own affairs. Then they'd petition for conservatorship, take control of the house, the pension, the savings, the TSP account, all of it, while I was still breathing, still watching, powerless to stop it, because legally I'd have been declared unfit. Gifford Aldcroft had looked at me across his desk and spoken the words that made everything horribly clear at last. "Incapacitation, Mr. Pruitt. Not death. Just incapacitation." I drove home very carefully, both hands on the wheel, now understanding the full architecture of what my son and daughter-in-law had constructed. Friday morning, I logged into the joint savings account I had opened when Colt was 10 years old. The balance on the screen, $84,723, where there should have been $380,000, told me the pills had only been the beginning. I sat at the desk in the spare room, staring at that number, and refreshed the page twice, thinking maybe the bank's site had loaded wrong. Same number, both times. $84,723. The account I'd set up for Colt's future, the one with both our names on it, so he'd have access if something ever happened to me. Everything Lorraine and I had saved that wasn't locked inside the thrift savings plan or tied up in the pension. 30 years of setting aside $100 here, $200 there, building slowly toward a secure retirement. $380,000 gone. I clicked into the transaction history. The page loaded slowly month by month, and I scrolled back through time, watching the theft unroll in reverse. October 3rd, withdrawals totaling $31,000. September 2nd withdrawals, $19,000. August 4th, withdrawals $42,000. I kept scrolling. July, June, May, April. The withdrawals ran back 14 months to August of the previous year, exactly 4 months after the Monday visits began. Irregular amounts $8,000, 1 month $15,000, the next $22,000 after that. Never the same interval, never the same figure, small enough and spread out enough that the bank's fraud detection never flagged any of it. Someone who understood how banking systems worked, who knew precisely how to stay beneath the automated alert thresholds. Someone with legal access to the account who could authorize electronic transfers without triggering a review. I printed the transaction history. 12 pages. I spread them across the desk and looked at the systematic theft laid out in tidy rows of debits, each one time-stamped and electronically authorized through the online portal. 14 months of small, irregular amounts, just plausible enough to resemble normal account activity if you weren't paying close attention. But I had been paying close attention only to the wrong things, to symptoms I'd attributed to aging, while they were draining everything Lorraine and I had built over 3 decades of careful saving. $84,723. They'd left just enough so the account wouldn't automatically close. Somehow that was almost worse than taking it all, leaving me the scraps like change left on a restaurant table. I sat there for 20 minutes staring at those 12 pages, a cold rage settling into my chest like concrete setting, not the hot kind that makes you shout or put your fist through a wall, the cold kind that burns away confusion and leaves nothing behind but clarity and purpose. Then I picked up the phone and called Clyde. He answered on the second ring. "Clyde," I said, "the joint account. The savings $380,000. It's gone. All but $84,723. 3 seconds of silence on the line. "I'm coming," Clyde said. "Your knee, I'm coming," he said again and hung up. 40 minutes later, 10 minutes faster than the drive from Broken Arrow should take his truck, pulled into my driveway. I watched through the kitchen window as he climbed out slowly, favoring his left leg, and made his way to the front door. I opened it before he could knock. "Tea?" I asked. "Yeah," Clyde said. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured 2 cups, set the printed bank statements between us. Clyde picked them up without a word and began reading, turning pages deliberately, his face completely still. When he finished, he set the papers down with care and looked at me. "So," he said, "pills to make you look incompetent, legal clause in your will for incapacity, money already gone. What else?" "That's it," I said. "That's everything I know so far." Clyde nodded slowly. "And Colt's coming by tomorrow for lunch." "Noon," I said. "Bringing sandwiches from the deli. Are you going to confront him?" "No," I said, "not yet. I need proof, irrefutable legal proof. Right now, I have a pill that could have come from anywhere. A will clause, that's standard language, and bank withdrawals he had legal authority to make. A lawyer would tear it apart in an hour. I need something undeniable." Clyde was quiet for a moment, looking out the kitchen window at Lorraine's vegetable garden, then back at me. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Not whether I was certain, or whether there might be another explanation, or whether I'd thought it through. Clyde knew me well enough to know I'd already worked through all of that. He was just asking what came next. "I need to catch them in the act," I said. "Monday evening when they come at 9. I need documentation that can't be disputed," Video Clyde said. Not a question. Video, I agreed. The bathroom where Colt spends 9 minutes alone. If I can record him tampering with my medications, actually watch him do it, that's proof. "Hidden camera," Clyde said. Angled toward the medicine cabinet, motion. Activated. "I don't know anything about that kind of equipment," I said. "I do," Clyde said. "My daughter uses one for her dog. Small wireless thing streams right to your phone. Picks up any movement. We can get it set up tomorrow morning before they arrive for lunch. 28 years of working alongside someone builds a language without words." Clyde looked at those bank statements for 30 seconds and understood everything I needed him to understand. "Then we'll make the proof," Clyde said simply. He didn't ask if I was certain, didn't raise the possibility that there might be an explanation I'd overlooked, didn't suggest I sleep on it or give it more time. He just said we'd make the proof past tense becoming future tense, the decision already sealed. I'd called him from 40 minutes away, barely gotten through saying the account was empty before he was already heading out to his truck. Drove the whole way on a knee that hadn't healed properly from surgery 3 months ago. one that hurt him every time he touched the brake pedal. 28 years. He drove 40 minutes on a bad knee without waiting for me to finish the sentence. Clyde came back Friday evening, carrying a pet monitoring camera the size of a matchbox, and I felt physically sick knowing we were about to turn my bathroom into a surveillance site. But I also knew it was the only way to prove what my son was doing in there for 9 minutes every Monday. He set the box on the kitchen table and opened it without ceremony. Inside a small white camera, a magnetic mounting bracket, and a charging cable. Wireless, Clyde said. Streams to your phone or laptop. Motion-activated records, everything stores it in the cloud. My daughter uses it to keep an eye on her dog when she's at work. We went upstairs to the hallway. I stood outside the bathroom door while Clyde moved slowly back and forth, checking angles, testing sight lines, working out where the camera could sit without drawing attention. We need a clear view of the bathroom door, he said, and the hallway leading up to it. Anyone going in or coming out, you won't see inside the bathroom itself, but you'll have timestamps, duration, everything. Where, I asked. Clyde looked at the hallway closet directly across from the bathroom. He opened the door. Shelves inside, towels, spare, blankets, bathroom supplies. He reached up to the middle shelf and shifted a stack of towels to one side. Here, he said. Camera on this shelf angled down and across. Leave the closet door open just a crack, 2 inches, maybe 3. Won't look out of place. You leave closet doors open sometimes, right? Sometimes, I said. So it won't raise any flags. Clyde pulled the camera from its packaging and fixed the magnetic bracket to the shelf. He positioned it, carefully stepped back, adjusted the angle, stepped back again. My laptop was downstairs. I went to fetch it, returned, and Clyde connected the camera to the wireless network while I watched the feed come up on the screen. The view was exactly right. A straight shot of the bathroom door and the hallway leading to it. Anyone coming down that hall would be plainly visible. Anyone going in or out would be captured with a timestamp and duration. Test it, Clyde said. I walked down to the bathroom door, opened it, stepped inside, pulled it shut behind me, waited 10 seconds, then came back out. Clyde pulled up the recording on my laptop. There I was, clear as anything, moving down the hallway, reaching for the door handle. Timestamp 7:23:47 p.m. door, closing behind me. Closed for 9 seconds. Then me, stepping back out. Timestamp 7:23:56 p.m. 9 seconds inside. It'll record Monday night, Clyde said. Every second of those 9 minutes. I felt genuinely sick gripping the hallway door frame, while Clyde calmly nudged the camera angle 1 last degree. I feel sick doing this, I said, spying on my own son inside my own house. Clyde looked at me for a long moment. You're not spying, he said. You're documenting a crime that's already in progress. There's a difference. There was something deeply wrong about mounting a camera to watch your own child commit a crime. But there was something more deeply wrong about what he'd been doing for 14 months. I had to keep clear on which wrongness came first. Clyde finished the setup, ran the feed tests 3 more times, walked me through accessing the recordings from my phone, from my laptop, from any device with an internet connection. Everything uploaded automatically to secure cloud storage. Dated time, stamped impossible to dispute. Monday night, Clyde said, you sit in the living room with Nadine the same as you always do. Don't look at your phone, don't check the feed. Behave exactly the way you've behaved for 18 months. Can you manage that? Yes, I said. When they leave, you wait 10 minutes. Then you look at the recording. All right. Then you call me, Clyde said. Doesn't matter what hour it is. You call me and we work out what comes next. He headed back to Broken Arrow at 8:30, his knees still giving him trouble, though he never mentioned it. I stood in the driveway and watched his taillights fade down the street, then went back inside to a house that now had a camera watching the hallway outside my bathroom. Saturday morning at 9, I drove to the pharmacy. Pauline wasn't working, a different pharmacist today, someone younger I'd never seen before. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to talk to anyone. I went straight to the vitamin aisle and found what I needed. Vitamin B, 12 tablets. White oval, 500 micrograms. Not a perfect match in size to my blood pressure medication, but close enough. Close enough that you wouldn't notice anything off if you glanced at them inside a pill organizer in the low light of a bathroom. I bought 2 bottles, paid cash, drove home. Back in my bathroom, I sat on the edge of the counter and opened my 7-day pill organizer. Tuesday through Monday, 7 compartments, each holding a single white oval tablet. I emptied them out one at a time, removed the real blood pressure pills, set them in a small pile on the counter, then opened the vitamin bottle and put a vitamin in each slot, one for Tuesday, one for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 7 vitamins, white and oval, and entirely harmless. The real medication? The pills my heart actually needed, I carried to my bedroom and locked in the dresser drawer. The key went into my wallet. Monday night, Colt would come into this bathroom, would spend 9 minutes in here, would open this organizer, would swap out what he believed were my blood pressure pills for whatever diuretic he'd brought with him. And it wouldn't matter. I held that organizer full of vitamins and understood what Monday night would look like. Colt would make his swap replace these decoys with his poison, and I would take nothing. He'd believe he was drugging me. I'd be taking vitamin B12. For the first time in 14 months, I controlled what went into my body. I'd take my real medication from the locked drawer in my bedroom, beyond his reach. Whatever he placed in this organizer, I wouldn't touch it. A small victory, but it felt enormous. I stood in my bathroom Saturday morning, holding that organizer, knowing that Monday evening, when Colt opened it and made his careful exchange when he replaced my pills with his poison, none of it would reach me anymore. Whatever he put in those slots Monday night, it wouldn't matter. I was protected now, insulated from my own son's scheme to strip me of my mind and steal what remained of my life while I was still drawing breath. That was the only thing that felt like winning. Saturday at 11:45, Colt arrived alone for lunch. Nadine was busy with her sister, he said. I had to sit across the kitchen table from my son and make easy conversation about the weather, knowing the camera upstairs was recording the hallway and the pills in my bathroom, organizer were vitamins. He had no idea were harmless. He hugged me at the door the way he always did, warm and familiar, and for a moment, I felt the full weight of it, letting my son walk through my door while I had set a trap to catch him dismantling me. Just me today, Dad, Colt said. Nadine had that thing with her sister. Hope that's all right. Of course, I said. Made plenty of food. I'd put lunch together that morning, ham and cheddar on sourdough the way he liked it. Potato chips, coffee, Lorraine's oatmeal raisin cookies I'd baked Friday night because I needed something to do with my hands. Needed to stay occupied so I wouldn't think too hard about what was coming. We sat at the kitchen table and ate, the same table where we'd shared hundreds of meals while he was growing up. Same chairs, same view through the window of Lorraine's garden, going quiet for winter. Weather's been strange, Colt said. October shouldn't still feel like this. Global patterns shifting, I said. Read something about it in the paper. How's the garden holding up? Lorraine's tomatoes are still coming in, I said. Late fruit. I'll need to pull the plants before the first frost. She always had a good eye for timing with planting. Colt said, better than me. Everything I put in the ground dies. We talked about the garden, about the neighborhood, about Clyde's knee still not right after the surgery. Normal father and son talk, easy and comfortable, the kind we'd fallen into over 32 years. But I noticed something I couldn't stop noticing, Colt's eyes. The way they tracked me when I spoke, when I reached for my coffee cup, when I lost the thread of a sentence mid-thought, just a normal conversational pause, the kind that happens to everyone, and had to double back. You were telling me about the Bradford pear, Colt said. The one 2 houses down. Right, I said, dropping leaves too early. Doris thinks it's diseased. Colt nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on my face, measuring the way you'd study someone you were monitoring for signs of slipping. You seem good today, he said, sharp. How's your memory been? Same as always, I said. Why just checking, Colt said. You know at your age it's worth keeping tabs on. I had always read that look in his eyes as worry a son keeping watch over his aging father. But sitting across from him that Saturday, knowing what I now knew, I understood it differently. He wasn't worried, he was assessing. Tracking my decline the way a clinician watches a patient deteriorate, looking for the effects he'd been deliberately engineering for 14 months. Every question about my memory, every time he asked whether I was eating right, taking my medication, feeling steady on my feet, not concern. Data collection. Watching to gauge whether the poisoning was taking hold, whether I was showing the confusion and forgetfulness that would eventually hand him grounds to have me declared incompetent. Any job leads I asked, steering the conversation elsewhere. A few interviews, he said. Nothing solid yet. Market's tough. He'd been out of work for over a year. I understood that now. The Monday visits had begun 3 months after he lost his job, right when desperation would have been digging in, when the savings were running thin and the bills were stacking up. When my estate, my house, my pension, my accounts would have stopped looking like inheritance and started looking like survival. We finished lunch, I cleared the plates. Colt stood up and stretched. "Mind if I use your bathroom, Dad?" he asked. "Go ahead," I said. He went upstairs. I heard his footsteps cross the hallway. Carpet heard the bathroom door pull shut. I sat back down at the kitchen table. My fork was still in my hand. I set it down carefully on the plate. Upstairs in the hallway, closet door, open 2 inches, the camera was recording motion-activated streaming to the cloud timestamp and duration captured for every second. Colt was in the bathroom with my pill organizer with the vitamins he believed were my blood pressure medication. Whatever he was doing in there, swapping pills, checking the supply, confirming that Monday's visit would hold to the pattern, it didn't matter. The pills were fake. I was safe. But the camera was watching. I sat at the kitchen table and counted. 1 minute, 2, 3. The house was still. I could hear the clock above the stove, could hear a car pass outside, could hear my own breath moving in and out. 4 minutes, 5, 6, 8. I counted everyone. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The way children measure time, the way you track something you need to document to prove to make real. 8 minutes in a bathroom on a Saturday afternoon. What could a person possibly be doing for 8 minutes? I already knew what he was doing. That wasn't the question. I heard the toilet flush, heard the faucet run, normal sounds, the sounds of someone keeping up the performance. Colt came back downstairs looking lighter than when he'd gone up, shoulders looser, face less drawn, the same look he always wore after those bathroom visits, the look of someone who'd finished a necessary task, checked an important box, moved 1 step closer to a destination only he could see. "Thanks for lunch, Dad," he said, anytime I said. We walked to the front door together. He hugged me again, held it for 3 seconds the way he'd been hugging me since he was 10 years old, and finally tall enough to reach my shoulders. "Love you, Dad," he said. "Love you too," I said, and I meant it. That was the hardest part. Not the knowing, not the counting, not the camera recording everything upstairs. The hardest part was that I could still mean those 3 words while I was timing his crime. I stood in the doorway and watched him walk to his car, watched him back out of the driveway, watched his taillights fade down the street. Then I closed the door and stood in the entryway for a long moment, letting it settle what had just happened. 8 minutes. He was in that bathroom 8 minutes. I counted every one of them. Saturday evening, I pulled up the camera footage on my laptop with Clyde on the phone, and we watched together as Colt headed upstairs at 12:47 p.m. And by the 6th minute, we both knew that 8 minutes behind a closed bathroom door wasn't going to be enough to prove anything. I'd called Clyde the moment Colt's car disappeared from the street. He answered on the first ring. "Pull it up," he said. "I'll watch with you." I opened the laptop and went to the camera's cloud storage. The afternoon's recording was right there. Motion-activated timestamp beginning at 11:43 a.m. when Colt first came upstairs to leave his coat in the spare room. "Got it," I said into the phone. "Jump ahead to the bathroom," Clyde said. I scrolled through. 12:47 p.m. Colt moving down the hallway, closing in on the bathroom door. 12:47, Clyde said, watching from his own screen 40 minutes away in Broken Arrow. He's reaching for the handle. Then the bathroom door swung open and he stepped inside. It closed behind him. We watched the closed door, the timestamp ticking in the corner of the screen. 12:47:18, 12:47:19, 12:47:20. At 12:48:03, the door was still firmly shut. We kept watching the closed door, the empty hallway, the seconds advancing one by one. 12:51:34. The door opened. Colt came out, eased it shut behind him, and walked back down the hallway toward the stairs. 6 minutes, Clyde said quietly. 12:47 to 12:51. 6 minutes. I played it back. Watched Colt go in again. Watched the door close. Watched him step out at 12:51. 6 minutes in a bathroom on a Saturday afternoon. "But, Clyde," I said slowly, "we can't see inside the bathroom. The camera shows him going in, shows the closed door, shows him coming out, but we can't see the pill organizer, can't see his hands, can't see what he's actually doing in there." Clyde went quiet for a long moment. "You're right," he said at last. "This shows he was in there 6 minutes, which is strange, but it doesn't show the crime itself. And Nadine wasn't here," I said. "Saturday was just Colt alone. Monday evenings they both come. The full pattern isn't there. Monday, Clyde said. You need Monday night, both of them. The complete routine they've been running for 18 months. We'd set the trap right. The camera worked. The angle was good. Colt had done exactly what we'd expected him to do. And somehow, none of it was enough yet. What do I do? I asked. You go to the police, Clyde said. Tomorrow morning, you bring them everything we have. The pill, the blood work, the bank statements, the footage, and you let them tell you what they need to open an investigation. Sunday morning at 9, I drove to the Tulsa Police Department downtown and asked to speak with a detective about elder abuse. They put me in a small office with chairs worn down by too many people carrying too many terrible stories. The walls were beige. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Detective Reuben Staley came in 15 minutes later. He was around 50, cool and sharp-eyed in the manner of a man who'd probably heard every impossible story Tulsa had to offer. He sat down across from me, opened a notebook, and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page in careful, precise handwriting. Mr. Pruitt, he said, tell me why you're here. So I told him everything from the beginning. The Monday visit starting 18 months ago. The 3 questions always the same. The 9 minutes alone in the bathroom every week. Clyde finding the pill on the floor. Pauline identifying it as a diuretic. Dr. Cormac's blood work showing low potassium. The incapacity clause in my will. The joint bank account drained to $84,723. I told him about the camera, about Saturday's footage, about needing proof, but not yet having enough. Staley listened without visible reaction, took notes, asked questions in a flat and methodical way. Your son's current employment status, unemployed over a year now. His wife part-time at a dental office. Their finances. I'd assumed difficult given the job loss and what they've already taken from my account. Staley wrote it all down. When I finished, he asked to see the evidence. I showed him the printed bank statements, the Saturday footage on my phone, and the original diuretic pill Clyde had found now sealed in a small plastic bag. He went through each item carefully, taking his time. The Saturday footage shows suspicious behavior, Staley said at last. 6 minutes in a bathroom is unusual, but we need to see both subjects present to establish the conspiracy pattern. You said Monday evenings are when they both come same time every week. 9 o'clock, I said. Exactly. For 18 months. And the routine never changes. The questions the bathroom visit the duration. Never, I said. Staley nodded slowly, still writing. Here's what I need, Mr. Pruitt, he said. Monday evening footage. Both your son and his wife present. The full pattern documented arrival time. The questions your daughter-in-law uses to keep you occupied. Your son's bathroom visit and how long he's in there. Everything that establishes conspiracy to commit elder abuse, possibly attempted murder, depending on how the DA's office decides to charge it. How do you sit across from a police detective and agree to let your son poison you one more time so the evidence will be complete? You don't agree. He tells you that's what's required, and you understand there's no other way. The pills in my organizer are vitamins now, I said. I swapped them Saturday morning. Whatever he does Monday night won't actually harm me. Good, Staley said. That's good. So, Monday evening, you let them in. You go through the routine exactly as normal. The camera records everything. And Tuesday morning, you bring me the footage. I'll have officers standing by to make arrests as soon as we've reviewed it and confirmed what we're looking at. Just like that. Just like that, Staley said. But I need Monday night, Mr. Pruitt. I need both of them there. I need the complete pattern. Can you do that? What I was about to discover would force me to look at everything, every visit, every cup of coffee, every warm smile at my front door, and understand what it had really been. Before I tell you what that moment cost me, let me ask you this. If someone close to you had been quietly working against you, would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you wait and let the truth build its own case? I thought about sitting in my living room with Nadine, about hearing the doorbell at 9, about counting 9 minutes while Colt was upstairs doing what he'd been doing for 18 months. One more time. Yes, I said. I can do that. One more Monday, Staley said. Get me Monday night with both of them. Clear footage. Both perpetrators present the complete pattern, and I'll have what I need. Sunday afternoon, Gifford Aldcroft spread a dozen documents across his mahogany desk. Bank withdrawals, insurance applications, consent forms, each one bearing a signature that looked exactly like mine, but wasn't. And I understood the pills had only been the beginning. I'd left the police station Sunday morning and driven straight to Aldcroft's office. Called him from the parking lot, apologized for the weekend intrusion, told him I needed to see every document connected to my accounts that had required my signature over the past 18 months. He said, give him 2 hours and he'd pull everything together. Now those documents lay across his desk in neat rows, arranged by date. Aldcroft pointed to the first one with the tip of his pen. The joint account withdrawals, he said. Everyone required electronic authorization with your signature. These aren't your signatures, Mr. Pruitt. They're very convincing forgeries, but they're not yours. He set 2 signature scans side by side under the desk lamp. Mine from a recent will amendment. Another from a bank withdrawal authorization dated 6 months ago. They looked identical. Here, Aldcroft said, his pen touching the capital B in Pruitt. Your B has a slight hook at the base of the vertical stroke. This one doesn't. And here he moved the pen to the G in Gerald. Your G tilts forward about 5 degrees. This one is perfectly vertical. I leaned in closer. He was right. Microscopic differences, the kind you'd only catch under magnification with a trained eye, but differences all the same. Every withdrawal from that account over the past 14 months was authorized with a forged signature, Aldcroft said. Systematic, methodical. Someone spent a long time studying your handwriting? How long? Months, probably. Maybe more. To get past bank verification systems, you have to practice until the muscle memory is there. Pressure, stroke, speed, pen, angle, all of it. Aldcroft moved to another document. Then there's this, he said. A $750,000 term life insurance policy taken out 3 months ago. You're the insured. Your son is the applicant and sole beneficiary. I stared at the policy application. My signature at the bottom plain as anything except it wasn't my signature. This consent form here, Aldcroft tapped the page. Also forged. The insurance company reached out to my office Friday about irregularities. They ran a routine audit, flagged the signature as potentially fraudulent, and asked me to verify it. I compared it against documents I have on file. It's not yours. $750,000 on top of what they'd already drained from the savings account, plus the house, the pension, whatever else they could reach. Someone had practiced my signature not once, not casually, but deliberately and methodically until they could fool professionals whose job it was to catch exactly this. Who has access to documents bearing your signature? Aldcroft asked. Colt, I said. He's had copies of my willpower of attorney form's old tax returns. I handed them over years ago in case something happened to me. So he had source material, Aldcroft said. Plenty of samples to study and copy from. I leaned back in the leather chair and tried to take in the full scale of it. The pills to erode my competence. The forged signatures to drain accounts and secure insurance payouts. The incapacity clause to seize legal control if I survived. The life insurance payout if I didn't. Every angle covered. Every outcome accounted for. 14 months of calculated systematic fraud, built to extract over $1 million from my estate one way or another. I thanked Aldcroft, drove home, made tea. I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table staring out at Lorraine's garden, waiting for Monday to come so I could sit through one more performance while Detective Staley arrested my son. At 7 Sunday evening, my phone rang. Staley's name on the screen. Mr. Pruitt, he said, I've been pulling financials on your son and daughter-in-law. Wanted to give you an update before tomorrow night. What did you find? Your son's broke, Staley said flatly. Savings gone 3 months behind on rent credit cards maxed out. Standard financial desperation. But here's what matters. Your daughter-in-law Nadine owes $180,000 to an underground lender. I set my cup down carefully. High-interest loan, Staley went on. The kind desperate people take when the banks have already said no. A speculative investment went bad 2 years ago. She's been trying to dig out ever since. The lender's name is Dwayne Colbert. Not the kind of man you miss payments with. When's it due? End of the month, Staley said. 11 days from now. That's your timeline, Mr. Pruitt. That's why this is happening right now. The urgency. She has 11 days to come up with $180,000 or face consequences I don't need to describe. I thought about Nadine sitting across from me in my living room every Monday for 18 months, talking about the weather, asking about the garden, smiling. Your son's situation is desperate, Staley said, but hers is catastrophic. And here's what else. We pulled phone records, text messages, everything we could access legally. The communication pattern is plain. She initiates, she plans, she directs. You're saying I'm saying it's not him, Mr. Pruitt, or not just him. Your son's broke and probably willing to do reckless things because of it. But your daughter-in-law is the one carrying the debt, the deadline, and the detailed plan to solve both problems using your estate. I'd been thinking of Nadine as the accomplice, the one who kept me distracted in the living room, while Colt worked upstairs in the bathroom. I'd had it exactly backward. She was the architect. My son was the instrument she'd been swinging. Follow the debt, Staley said. It leads to her. Tomorrow night when you let them in at 9, remember that the woman sitting with you in the living room, she's the one who designed all of this. Your son is the one she's using to carry it out. Understood, I said. You still okay with tomorrow? Yes, I said. I'm okay with it. Staley hung up. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, looking out at Lorraine's garden, taking in what it meant that the woman I'd welcomed into my home every Monday for 18 months, the one who'd asked about my health and chatted about the weather while Colt poisoned me upstairs, had been the one running the whole operation. Follow the debt, Staley had said. It leads to her. Monday morning. The morning I'd have to sit across from Nadine Pruitt one more time and pretend I didn't know she'd spent 2 years engineering a plan to take everything Lorraine and I had built. I drank my tea and watched the first light touch the tomato plants and thought about patience. I'd been awake since 4:30, made tea at 5, sat at the kitchen table as the sky moved from black to gray to the pale blue of an October dawn, watching Lorraine's vegetable garden come out of the dark one detail at a time. The tomato plants she'd put in 2 springs before she died, the herb bed along the fence, the patch of earth where she'd tried growing peppers one year, failed, tried again the next, and succeeded. 13 hours until 9 o'clock. 13 hours until the doorbell rang, and I opened my front door and let them in one last time. My phone rang at 8, Staley's name on the screen. Mr. Pruitt, he said, just checking in. How are you holding up? Fine, I said. Ready. Everything's in place, Staley said. Officers will be stationed at the end of your street by 8:30 tonight. Unmarked cars. You won't see them, but they'll be watching. After your son and daughter-in-law leave the house, we need you to hold them there a few extra minutes. How do I manage that? Offer tea. Ask about their week. Whatever keeps them from walking out the door. We need to confirm their location in your driveway, make sure they're getting into their vehicle before we move in. 5 minutes would help. 10 would be better. I can do that, I said. The camera is still recording. Yes, good. Tonight at 9, you let them in exactly as you have for 18 months. Same routine, same questions. Your daughter-in-law sits with you. Your son goes to the bathroom. The camera captures everything. They leave. You keep them talking for those extra minutes. Then we move. Understood. You're doing the right thing, Staley said. I know I said, though, I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Wasn't sure doing the right thing was supposed to feel this much like betrayal. We hung up. I stood at my bathroom mirror for a long time, afterward looking at a 60-year-old man who was about to help document his own son's arrest. Lorraine used to tell me I was too patient for my own good, that I'd let people take advantage because I'd rather wait and see than move too soon. She'd say it with affection most of the time, but sometimes with real frustration, like the time our neighbor borrowed the lawnmower and kept it for 3 months while I just waited for him to bring it back instead of asking. Patience isn't weakness when you're holding out for exactly the right moment. It's just another word for strategy for knowing that some things can't be forced, that justice takes the time it requires. Maybe she'd been wrong about me. Maybe tonight, patience was the thing that would save me. I spent the morning in the garden, pulled weeds, watered the tomato plants, even though they didn't need it. Kept my hands moving so my mind wouldn't sink into the 13 hours stretching between that pale October dawn and 9 o'clock. At 11, my phone rang again. Aldcroft this time. Gerald, he said. I'm at the police station with Detective Staley. There's something you need to know before tonight. What is it? They analyzed Nadine's phone, the one Staley seized Sunday evening on the warrant. Gerald, there are 37 photographs of your signature on that phone. 37. I sat down on the back porch steps. What do you mean, photographs? Pictures she took of documents bearing your signature, tax returns, old checks, retirement paperwork from the Postal Service, Christmas cards you'd signed, anything she could get her hands on that carried your handwriting. She photographed all of it. Why to study it, Aldcroft said. To practice. To learn every detail of how you form each letter, where you press down the angle of each stroke. That's how she got precise enough to fool bank verification systems. She'd built herself a comprehensive reference library. I looked out at Lorraine's garden, at the tomato plants putting out their last fruit of the season. How long ago, I asked. The metadata on the photos. Aldcroft paused. The oldest one is dated 2 years ago. 2 years, Gerald. That's 6 months before Colt lost his job. Before any financial crisis, before the debt, before any of the supposed desperation that might drive someone to this. 2 years. She'd been planning this for 2 years. The photos span the whole period. Aldcroft continued. 1 here, 2 there, a few more 6 months later. Methodical patient building a complete record of your handwriting over time. By the time she actually started forging signatures 14 months ago, she'd already been preparing for a year. Does Detective Staley know he's the one who found it? Forensics pulled the phone records overnight, found the photos this morning. They're running fingerprint analysis on the documents she photographed, the physical papers, to confirm she's the one who handled them. Preliminary results show Nadine's prints on every document. Colt's prints on none of them. I sat on those porch steps for a long time after Aldcroft hung up, trying to absorb what 2 years of planning actually meant. 37 photographs, 2 years of preparation. She'd been studying my signature, learning to replicate it, laying the groundwork for massive fraud before there was any crisis at all, before Colt lost his job, before the debt to Dwayne Colbert turned everything urgent. The desperation wasn't the motive. It was the excuse, the opportunity she'd been building toward. Colt losing his job hadn't created the scheme. It had just handed Nadine the cover story she needed, the desperate partner she could maneuver into position, the timeline that would make everything look like panic rather than cold calculation. She'd been preparing to destroy me before she had any reason to need to. I said that out loud to Lorraine's empty garden. Aldcroft had sounded almost apologetic, delivering the timeline as if he understood it made everything worse. Not just that someone had planned to harm you, but that they'd done it methodically over years. That every smile and every conversation and every Monday evening visit had been a performance laid over long-term strategy. I thought about the first Monday they came, July, 18 months ago. Nadine sitting in my living room asking about Lorraine's tomato plants. By then she'd already been photographing my signature for 6 months. Already planning, already preparing. Every visit after that, every question about my health, every look of concern, every time she'd touch Colt's arm to redirect or settle him, had all been part of an operation that began before I even knew there was anything to worry about. She'd been preparing for this before Colt ever lost his job. 2 years. The afternoon stretched like a held breath. I'd spent hours turning over those 37 photographs, 2 years of careful preparation. And now the house felt too quiet, too still, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to break. At 3:15, Colt's forgotten phone rang from the kitchen counter where he'd left it Saturday after lunch. I picked it up without thinking. Unknown number on the screen. I answered, "Hello, where's Nadine?" A man's voice cold and impatient. No greeting, no name. "Who is this?" I asked. "Is she there? Put her on." "She's not here. Who's calling?" Silence for 3 seconds. Then, "Tell her Dwayne called. Deadlines end a month." "I'm not kidding." "Dwayne," I started, but he was already talking over me. "Tell her either it's done this month or you know what happens to all of you." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen holding Colt's phone, staring at the screen as it went back to the lock photo. A picture of Colt and Nadine at someone's wedding. Both smiling, both looking young and ordinary, both planning to destroy me. Dwayne Colbert. The creditor Staley had told me about the underground lender. Nadine owed $180,000 to this man with an end of October deadline, the kind of man you don't miss payments with. He'd called Colt's phone looking for Nadine, threatened consequences for all of you if the deadline wasn't met. Not just financial consequences. The tone in his voice had been flat matter of fact, the way someone speaks when they're describing guaranteed outcomes, not issuing warnings. I set the phone back on the counter and walked to the living room window, looking out at the street where unmarked police cars would be in position in 5.5 hours. The 37 signature photographs, the 2 years of planning, the systematic fraud, suddenly it all arranged itself into a different kind of sense. Nadine wasn't just greedy, she was terrified. 2 years ago, she'd taken that loan. Maybe for an investment that collapsed, maybe for something else. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd been drowning in debt for 2 years, watching interest compound, watching the deadline draw closer, knowing what happened to people who couldn't settle up with men like Dwayne Colbert. So she'd started planning photographing my signature, studying my handwriting, building the foundation for a fraud that would take time to execute but would eventually pull enough money from my estate to save her life. Then Colt lost his job. Perfect timing, perfect cover story. She could accelerate, use his desperation and his fragile state to bring him in as the active participant, while she ran everything from behind the curtain. It didn't make what she'd done any less evil, but it made it more human, the evil of someone backed into a corner, making terrible choices to survive, and dragging my son down with her. How do you prepare for the moment? You stop pretending you don't know. You cook soup. You set the table. You eat dinner alone and think about the person your son used to be before life, and fear and ruinous choices turned him into a man who would forge his father's name to steal his home. At 6, I made soup, vegetables simple. Lorraine's recipe, the one she'd put on during cold evenings when neither of us wanted anything complicated. Sliced bread from the loaf I'd bought Friday. Set a single place at the kitchen table. Ate slowly, looking out at Lorraine's garden. The roses were going dormant for winter leaves, starting to yellow blooms long finished for the season. She'd put those roses in the spring after we bought the house 30 years ago. They'd come back every year without fail. I thought about Colt at 10 years old. We'd had a dog then, Biscuit, an old basset hound Lorraine had brought home from the shelter when Colt was small. Biscuit was already ancient when we got him, but he'd been good with kids, patient and gentle, and Colt had loved that dog more than anything. Biscuit died when Colt was 10, heart failure. The vet said, old age, these things happen. Colt cried for hours, inconsolable, sat on the floor of the vet's office holding Biscuit's collar and sobbing, and nothing Lorraine or I said made any difference. Finally, I just sat down on the floor next to him and held him until he cried himself out. That child was real. The love was real. So was the man who spent 14 months systematically poisoning his father to help his wife steal $1 million estate. Both things are true. Love doesn't erase betrayal. Betrayal doesn't erase love. You just have to hold both of those facts in your head at the same time and figure out how to keep going. I finished the soup, tasted nothing. At 8:45, I cleared the table, washed the bowl, and spoon-dried them carefully, put them back in the cabinet, wiped the counter clean, dried my hands on the towel Lorraine had embroidered 20 years ago. Small yellow flowers, her initials, LRP, in the corner, in thread she'd picked to match the kitchen curtains. At 8:50, I walked to the living room. At 8:55, I sat down in my armchair, both hands resting on my knees, and waited. The house was completely quiet. The clock on the mantel ticked steady and mechanical. Through the front window, the street looked empty and ordinary, no sign of the police vehicles already positioning themselves at the far end. Right about now, 5 minutes, 4. In my pocket, my phone held the photographs Gifford Aldcroft had sent me. 37 images of my signature that Nadine had gathered over 2 years, studied the way a student studies before a final exam, practiced until she could copy every last detail. In my chest, my heart held the memory of a 10-year-old boy weeping over a dead dog. Inconsolable, his whole world shattered because something he loved had stopped breathing. 3 minutes. 5 more minutes. Now 3. The doorbell would ring. I'd push myself up from this chair, walk to the front door, open it. Colt and Nadine would be standing there, smiling, asking whether I'd taken my medication, whether I was eating properly, whether anyone else was home with me tonight. And I'd let them in. I'd let them run through their routine one more time. The camera would capture everything. The police would hold their position. And when they moved to leave, I'd offer coffee, keep them talking for another 5 minutes, 10, if I could manage it long enough for justice to show up in the form of unmarked cars and men carrying badges. 2 minutes. The clock ticked. I waited. I'd waited 43 years alongside Lorraine, watched her put roses and tomatoes in the ground, held her hand through 3 decades of quiet evenings that felt like forever, and turned out not to be nearly enough. I could wait 5 more minutes. 4. 3. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. I rose from my armchair, crossed to the front door, and opened it. Colt stood on my front step with Nadine beside him, both of them smiling, both looking exactly as they had looked 77 times before, concerned, warm, beautiful children checking in on an aging father. "Hey, Dad," Colt said. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside. I closed the door. The ritual started the way it always started. "Did you take your medication today, Dad?" "This morning," I said, with breakfast. "Are you eating well?" "Had soup and bread for dinner." Then the third question. "Is it just you tonight, Dad?" "Just me," I said. Quiet evening. Nadine's shoulders dropped maybe half an inch. Relief. They thought I didn't know. They thought tonight was like every other Monday routine, predictable, safe. The division of labor came immediately. Nadine drifted toward the living room. Colt hung back near the hallway. "Do you need anything from the kitchen?" Nadine asked Gerald. "I'm fine," I said. "I'll grab some water," Colt said, and headed down the hallway. I followed Nadine into the living room and settled into my usual chair. She sat across from me and smiled. "How have you been?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Garden's winding down for winter." "She always had good timing with planting," Nadine said. We sat there making small talk, while my son walked down my hallway to commit a crime I'd spent a week preparing to document. The camera was recording, the police were waiting, and I had to sit here and talk about gardens as if none of it was happening. I'd waited 43 years alongside Lorraine. I could wait 9 more minutes. "Weather's been so strange this year," Nadine said. "March felt like May. Now, October feels like August. Climate patterns shifting." "I was driving on I-44 last week," she continued. "Traffic was backed up near Stroud, took an extra hour." She was talking, filling space with words that didn't matter, keeping me occupied, making sure I stayed in that room, while Colt did what he'd been doing for 18 months. But I was noticing things I'd never noticed before. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway once, twice, fast little glances checking. Then her left hand moved. Small gesture, casual. Thumb up for just a second. A signal. The camera in the hallway closet was recording every second. I kept my face neutral, kept nodding, kept listening to Nadine talk about traffic and weather and someone's baby shower, and I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Colt was in my bathroom with my pill organizer, removing what he believed were my blood pressure pills, swapping them for diuretics designed to send my potassium crashing and make it look like I was losing my mind. Except the pills in that organizer were vitamins. Harmless. 10, 20, 30, 50. "I keep thinking spring should arrive," Nadine said, "but the mornings are still cold." Lorraine used to say, "Oklahoma doesn't have seasons." I said, "Just hot and less hot." 60, 80, 100. In the hallway closet, the camera was capturing everything. The timestamp, the duration. Colt, stepping into the bathroom, the door swinging shut. Everything Detective Staley needed to establish conspiracy to show. This wasn't a mistake, but a systematic crime carried out over 18 months. 100, 2100, 5200. "Do you need anything?" Nadine asked. "Water, coffee?" "I'm fine," I said. 250, 300, 350. Colt had been in that bathroom for 6 minutes now. 6 minutes to open a pill organizer. Swap 7 pills. Close it back up. 6 minutes because you have to be careful. Have to make sure everything looks exactly the way it looked before. 400, 455, 100, 538, 539, 540. 9 minutes. I heard the bathroom door open, heard Colt's footsteps in the hallway. He came back into the living room, looking lighter than when he'd left, shoulders looser, face less tight. "Ready to head out?" he asked Nadine. "If Gerald's all set," she said, smiling at me. "I'm fine," I said. "Thanks for stopping by." We walked to the front door together. Colt hugged me. Nadine hugged me next, both of them warm and familiar and entirely convinced they'd pulled it off. "Love you, Dad," Colt said. "Love you too," I said. Detective Staley had told me to keep them there 5 more minutes. 10 would be better. "Stay for coffee," I said. Colt glanced at Nadine. She touched his arm. That same quiet gesture that guided him, steered him. "We should get going," Colt said. "Early morning tomorrow." "Okay," I said. "Drive safe." I stood in the doorway and watched them walk to their car, watched the tail lights come on, watched them reverse out of my driveway and disappear down the street toward where the unmarked police cars were waiting. Then I shut the door, went back to the living room, and sat down in my chair. Nadine had been talking about weather on Interstate 44, something about a traffic backup near Stroud. I'd been counting to 540, 9 minutes exactly. The camera in the hallway closet had captured every second of it. Her glances toward the hallway, the thumbs-up signal with her left hand, Colt entering the bathroom, 9 minutes behind a closed door, Colt emerging, all of it time-stamped, documented, irrefutable. They thought they'd gotten away with it. I invited them to stay for coffee. They'd been on their way out. Colt had his hand on the doorknob, but I asked again a little more insistently. Just a few minutes. I made a pot this afternoon. Colt looked at Nadine. She looked at me. Something moved between them that I couldn't quite read, some silent calculation. And then Nadine smiled. "That would be nice, Gerald," she said. "We're not in a rush." We walked back to the kitchen. I poured 3 cups of coffee. We sat at the table where I'd eaten soup alone 3 hours earlier, where Lorraine and I had eaten breakfast together for 30 years, where Colt had done his homework as a teenager while complaining about algebra. "You never ask us to stay for coffee, Dad," Colt said, not suspicious, just curious. "Felt like company tonight," I said. We sat there for 40 minutes, talked about nothing in particular. Colt asked about the garden. Was it ready for winter? Had I pulled the tomato plants? Yet Nadine mentioned a friend who just had a baby, someone I'd never met. I asked how their week had been. Normal conversation, easy and ordinary, and completely hollow. They thought they'd gotten away with it, thought the pills were swapped, the plan executed, another Monday successfully completed. Outside, unmarked police cars waited at the end of my street. In the hallway closet, a camera had recorded everything they'd done. And here we sat drinking coffee like a normal family on a normal Monday evening. I watched Colt's face while he talked about looking for work, about an interview he had next week that probably wouldn't go anywhere. Watched the way his eyes moved, the way he held his coffee cup. Tried to see the 10-year-old boy who'd wept over a dead dog. Tried to see the man who'd forged my signature and taken everything I had. Both were true. Both of them were sitting right across from me. "Garden looks like it's ready for winter," Colt said. "Mom would be happy with how you've kept it up." "I try," I said. This was the last time I would pour my son coffee in that kitchen. The last time we'd sit at that table, pretending everything was fine. The last conversation before police cars and handcuffs and everything that followed. At 9:50, Colt glanced at his phone. "We should probably head out," he said, getting late. "Thanks for staying," I said. We walked to the front door. Colt hugged me, held it for 3 seconds the same way he'd been hugging me since he was tall enough to reach my shoulders. I hugged him back, meant it. That was the hardest part. Not the knowing, not the evidence, not the camera footage sitting there waiting to be reviewed. The hardest part was that I could still mean it when I held him. "Love you, Dad," he said. "Love you too," I said. Nadine hugged me next. Brief, warm, practiced. "Take care of yourself, Gerald," she said. I stood in the doorway and watched them walk to their car. Watched Colt open the passenger door for Nadine. Watched the taillights come on, watched them reverse out of my driveway and turn left down the street, heading toward I-244. Then I closed the door, went to the living room, sat down on the couch, and waited. My phone rang 3 minutes later. Detective Staley's name on the screen. "Mr. Pruitt." He said, "We have them." I didn't say anything. Couldn't say anything. "Officer stopped the vehicle on I-244, Staley continued. "About 3 miles from your house. Routine traffic stop, broken tail light. Asked for consent to search. They agreed." "We found the bottle," Staley said. "Not on Colt," Staley said, "in Nadine's purse. She was holding it. High-dose diuretics exactly like the pill my friend had found on my bathroom floor. She was carrying the evidence. Mr. Pruitt, not your son. Her." I sat there on the couch holding the phone, trying to take in what that meant. Nadine had the diuretics. Nadine was holding the actual pills, not Colt. He'd done the swap, but she'd kept them held onto them, made sure they stayed on her person, where she could manage them. Even in this, she was the one in control. "Where are they now?" I asked. "In custody, both of them. We're bringing them to the station for booking. I'll need you to come in tomorrow to go over the camera footage, make a formal statement. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "Are you all right, Mr. Pruitt?" Was I all right? I just sat at my kitchen table and poured coffee for my son and his wife 40 minutes before they were arrested for trying to kill me. I'd hugged him. I'd told him I loved him. I'd meant it. 3 miles, 14 minutes from my driveway to I-244. Done. "I'm all right," I said. Staley gave me the address for the police station, told me to come in at 10 the next morning, said he'd have the footage ready to review. We hung up. I sat on that couch for a long time after that. Didn't turn on the TV, didn't get up to make more coffee, just sat there in my living room, in the house Lorraine and I had bought 30 years ago. The house I'd nearly lost. The house my son had tried to steal. The clock above the mantel ticked. Outside, a car drove past. The ordinary sounds of a Monday night in Tulsa, Oklahoma, going on exactly as they always did, while my son sat in a police station 3 miles away, being charged with elder abuse and attempted murder. The bottle was in her bag, Staley had said, not on Colt and Nadine's purse. She'd been carrying the evidence the whole time, holding the pills, keeping control, even in the final moments. I sat on that couch for a long time. The house was very quiet. Detective Staley called Tuesday morning with the phone analysis. I'd spent the night on the couch not quite sleeping, not quite awake, just drifting somewhere in between. When my phone rang at 7:30, I answered on the first ring. "Mr. Pruitt," Staley said. "Forensics finished going through Nadine's phone overnight. There's something you need to know." "What is it?" "Her search history." She had searched for how long it takes for low potassium to cause heart failure in elderly, a specific query medical terminology, not something you type in casually. When I sat up on the couch. 18 months ago, Staley said. The day after the medication swap began, based on what they could establish from my pill organizer timeline. She'd researched it immediately. She knew exactly what she was doing from the start. 18 months. Not panic, not desperation making her careless, cold calculation from day one. Researching the timeline, understanding the mechanism, planning out how long it would take to make me appear incompetent enough to steal from, or sick enough to die. She searched for it the day after the swap started, Staley repeated. This wasn't improvisation, Mr. Pruitt. This was methodology. I thanked him, hung up, and sat on my couch, staring out at Lorraine's garden through the window, understanding that every Monday evening for 18 months, Nadine had known precisely what outcome she was working toward. At 10 o'clock, I drove to Dr. Cormack's office. He'd called Monday night after Staley contacted him, asked me to come in so he could walk me through what the blood work meant now that we knew what had been happening. I sat in his examination room while he pulled up my medical records on the screen. "I want to show you something," Dr. Cormack said. He pointed to a graph tracking my potassium levels over the past year. "This is normal range. This is where you were 3 months ago. This is where you were last month." The line dropped steadily, month after month. 2 more weeks, he said quietly. Maybe 3. That's what we'd have been looking at if this had continued. Your potassium would have fallen to dangerously low levels. Cardiac arrhythmia, potential heart failure. Would it have been obvious? I asked. Would you have known someone was poisoning me? No, Dr. Cormack said. That's the thing. Low potassium from diuretic abuse presents exactly like natural electrolyte imbalance in elderly patients. Fatigue, confusion, weakness. Symptoms we attribute to age or underlying conditions. And if it had progressed to cardiac arrest. He paused. We'd call it natural causes, probably attribute it to your existing hypertension, your age, the stress of being a widower. A stroke, I said. Likely yes, like Lorraine. Dr. Cormack looked at me for a long moment. Yes, just like your wife. Natural death, no autopsy required, no questions asked. I drove home very slowly, both hands on the wheel, turning over what 2 more weeks would have meant. 2 more Monday evenings, 2 more sets of pills swapped, 2 more steps toward a cardiac arrest that would have looked like natural causes like age, like the same thing that took Lorraine 4 years ago. Rope can rot from the inside while still holding weight on the outside. You don't see the damage until the moment it snaps. That's what they'd been doing to me for 18 months, rotting me from the inside while I kept holding weight, kept functioning, kept telling myself the fatigue and forgetfulness were just normal aging. Tuesday evening, I sat in my backyard looking at Lorraine's vegetable garden. The air was cool. October in Oklahoma, finally beginning to feel like autumn instead of an extended summer. I pulled one of the patio chairs up close to the herb bed and just sat there as the sun went down. No crying, no rage, just sitting. I thought about Colt at 10 years old, weeping over Biscuit at the vet clinic. That grief had been real. The love had been real. So was the man who'd spent 18 months systematically poisoning his father while going through the motions of caring about his health. I thought about Lorraine 43 years of marriage that had felt like both forever and not nearly enough. She never knew what he became. Maybe that was a mercy. I sat there until the stars came out, until the cold settled deep into my bones. Then I stood, walked closer to the fence where Lorraine had planted tomatoes 2 springs before she died. In the faint light from the kitchen window, I could make out small green shoots pushing up through the dark soil. New growth, seeds she'd put in the ground years ago, still producing, still coming back season after season. She would have been glad about that. Dr. Bramwell's report arrived through Gifford Aldcroft in the 3rd week of November. Weeks had passed since the arrest. October had become November. The tomatoes in Lorraine's garden finished their season. I pulled the plants, let the soil rest. Life continued in that strange way it does. After everything changes, ordinary tasks performed inside an extraordinary new reality. Gifford Aldcroft called Tuesday morning and asked if I could come to his office, said there was a psychiatric evaluation I needed to see. I drove downtown and sat across from him at the same mahogany desk where I'd first learned about forged signatures and fraudulent insurance policies. He slid a document across the desk, 30 pages, clinical language, Dr. Sylvia Bramwell's name at the top. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation of your son, Gifford Aldcroft said. Dr. Bramwell conducted it over the past 2 weeks. This is her report. I picked it up and began reading. Page 3, paranoid anxiety disorder, severe documented history spanning years. EA, page 5, delusional thinking patterns connected to safety and protection. Page 7, extreme susceptibility to psychological manipulation by trusted individuals. Page 9 stopped me cold. The subject genuinely believed he was acting in his father's best interest, Dr. Bramwell had written. He reports that he thought he was putting Dad somewhere safe and making sure he'd be taken care of. When confronted with the actual medical consequences of his actions, the potassium depletion, the cardiac risk, he became distressed and stated he didn't know it would hurt him. He believed he was facilitating a transfer to professional care, not causing harm. I looked up at Gifford Aldcroft. He didn't know. According to Dr. Bramwell, no. He was told by Nadine that the medication changes were temporary, transitional, designed to produce symptoms that would justify moving you to assisted living, where you'd be safer and better looked after. He believed he was protecting you. But the forged signatures, the stolen money, the insurance policy, those were Nadine's doing, Gifford Aldcroft said. No knowledge of the financial fraud. Dr. Bramwell's evaluation confirms he had no awareness of the signature forgeries, the account, withdrawals, the life insurance. Nadine kept all of it from him. She told him they were helping you, and he believed it. I read the report again then, a 3rd time. The 3rd time I let myself take it as truth rather than excuse. My son was sick, mentally ill in ways I had never recognized, never understood. And someone had taken that illness, that vulnerable, damaged part of him, and turned it into an instrument to commit crimes he didn't fully grasp. Your son was sick, Mr. Pruitt, Gifford Aldcroft said quietly. And someone used that. How do you hold a person accountable when they didn't understand what they were doing? How do you separate the crime from the exploitation, the intent from the illness, the harm caused from the genuine belief that they were helping? I had no answers. Sitting in Gifford Aldcroft's office with Dr. Bramwell's report in my hands, I understood I might never find them. A week later, Gifford Aldcroft called with the sentencing results. I was in my kitchen making tea when the phone rang. Tuesday afternoon, gray November sky outside the window. The hearing concluded this morning, Gifford Aldcroft said. I wanted to reach you before you saw it on the news. What happened? Your son pleaded guilty, all charges, didn't fight anything, didn't try to negotiate. His attorney advised against it, but Colt insisted. Why? To protect Nadine, Gifford Aldcroft said. He thought if he took full responsibility, she'd receive a lighter sentence. Thought he could shield her from the worst of it. I sat down at the kitchen table. But the prosecution had the text messages, Gifford Aldcroft continued. Recovered from Nadine's phone. 2 years of communication showing she initiated everything directed, everything manipulated him at every step. The messages were explicit, her telling him exactly what to do, when to do it, how to respond, if he had questions. The judge read them aloud in court. And the sentencing. Nadine received 12 years elder abuse insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. With the evidence of premeditation, the signature photographs, the search history, the text messages, the judge showed no leniency. And Colt. No prison time for Colt. Gifford Aldcroft said the psychiatric evaluation was impossible to dismiss, The judge ruled him not guilty by reason of insanity due to severe delusional manipulation. He was being committed to a secure state mental health facility for mandatory long-term treatment, not prison a treatment center where doctors would try to help rather than punish. Justice served, but far more complicated than I had ever imagined it would feel. Colt would lose his freedom, not behind bars, but behind locked doors of a different kind. My son had tried to kill me to protect the woman who was using him. That was the truth. Not a simple truth, not a comfortable one, but truth all the same. There's something else, Gifford Aldcroft said. Something that happened in court. What? When the judge read the text messages aloud, when it became undeniable that Nadine had orchestrated everything your son still tried to protect her, stood up in court and said it was his fault that he'd misunderstood her, that she'd never intended for any of it to happen the way it did. I closed my eyes. Even then, Gifford Aldcroft said, even after everything was laid out, after the evidence proved she'd manipulated him for years, he tried to protect her. The judge had him removed from the courtroom. He tried to protect her even then, I said. Yes, Gifford Aldcroft said. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat at my kitchen table with the phone against my ear, looking out at Lorraine's empty garden, trying to understand how love and betrayal could become so thoroughly tangled that even facing justice, even knowing the truth, my son had tried to shield the woman who destroyed him. Doris Kavanaugh came by 3 days after the sentencing. I'd seen her at the courthouse, a small woman in her 70s with careful posture and pearl earrings, but we hadn't spoken. She'd given her testimony at the police station weeks earlier, Detective Staley had told me. And now she stood on my porch holding a covered dish, wearing the expression I recognized from anyone carrying knowledge they wish they didn't have. I brought lemon bars, she said. I hope that's all right. I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten those poisoned meals for 18 months, and I made tea while she arranged the lemon bars on one of Lorraine's good plates. I testified about what I saw, Doris said quietly. Every Monday evening for a year and a half, 9 o'clock like clockwork. Nadine's car in my driveway. I poured the tea. My hands were steady now. The tremor had mostly faded. I thought it was a good thing, she continued. Her voice carried the weight of 18 months of misread kindness. Such a beautiful daughter-in-law, I kept telling myself, checking on her father-in-law, every week bringing him dinner. My own children live in Denver. They call on Sundays if I'm lucky. I actually envied you. The irony settled between us like a third presence at the table. Doris had watched the entire crime unfold while believing she was witnessing love. Every Monday at 9 p.m., Nadine had parked in my driveway, walked to my door with Tupperware containers, and added another dose to my slow execution. And my neighbor had seen every bit of it, had filed it in the quiet mental ledger of neighborhood observation, and mistaken it for devotion. What do you call evidence that looks like affection from the outside? It was a good thing, I said at last, and not a good thing, both at the same time. Doris nodded. She understood. We drank our tea in the kind of comfortable silence that settles between people who have both looked at something terrible and chosen not to look away. She left an hour later. I kept the lemon bars. The phone rang on a Thursday in December, 3 months after the sentencing. I almost didn't answer. I'd learned to be wary of unexpected calls, creditors, journalists, people who had heard about that poisoning case in Tulsa and wanted details I had no intention of sharing. But the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a 918 area code. Something made me pick up. Dad. Colt's voice, but different. Softer around the edges, careful in a way I'd never heard before. Not the defensive anger of our last exchange at the courthouse. Not the casual dismissal I'd endured for years. This was the voice of someone who'd been taken apart and was learning to put the pieces back together in a different arrangement. I'm here, I said. They let us make phone calls on Thursdays. He said, if we've completed our counseling sessions for the week, I've been doing the work, trying to outside my kitchen window. December light fell across the backyard. Clyde Whitmore had helped me plant bulbs in October, tulips and hyacinths that would come up in spring. Lorraine's garden continued. How are you? Colt asked. The question sat in the air between us. How was I? I was alive. I was learning to trust food again. I was sleeping through most nights without dreaming of Tupperware containers. I was 68 years old with a son in a treatment facility and a daughter-in-law in prison and a body that had survived something it shouldn't have. Getting by, I said. Some days better than others. His voice broke slightly. "I'm trying, Dad. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm trying." "I know," I said. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing shallow, uneven, the sound of someone gathering courage. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for all of it. For not seeing what was happening, for choosing her over you, for being so goddamn blind that I let you nearly die while I was busy being angry at you for not being the father I wanted." The apology hung between us. I could have said it was okay. Could have offered absolution forgiveness, the tidy resolution that happens in movies and on greeting cards. But it wasn't okay. It would never be fully okay. And we both needed to live inside that truth. "I know," I said again. Another silence, this one longer. I thought he might hang up. Thought maybe I should hang up, spare us both the awkwardness of an imperfect conversation that solved nothing and promised nothing. But neither of us moved. "The counselor here says some relationships can't be fixed," Colt said quietly. "Just renegotiated. Different terms, lower expectations." "Your counselor sounds smart," I said. "Some bridges don't get rebuilt. They get crossed one careful step at a time." "Can I call again?" he asked. "Next Thursday." I looked at Lorraine's photograph on the refrigerator. She was laughing in that picture, head thrown back, completely alive. If she were here, what would she want? Not perfection, not some fairy tale reconciliation. Just continuation. The possibility of something instead of nothing. "Yeah," I said. "You can call." We stayed on the line another minute without saying anything. No declarations, no promises, no absolution. Just breathing on opposite ends of a phone connection between a kitchen in Tulsa and a treatment center somewhere in the Oklahoma City region. That minute was worth more than most words. Colt called again the next Thursday and the Thursday after that. We didn't cover much ground, just updates about his counseling, whether I'd heard from the insurance company. Small things, safe things. Clyde Whitmore moved in 2 months after everything ended. He showed up one Saturday morning in December with 2 suitcases and a box of kitchen supplies. His leg was still giving him trouble. The surgery in September had helped, but the long drives between Broken Arrow and Tulsa were wearing on him. "Leg's not getting better for long drives," he said, standing in my kitchen with his coat still on. "And you've got that spare room sitting empty." It wasn't a question. Clyde being Clyde, practical, unsentimental, solving a problem without making it complicated. He didn't say he was worried about me, didn't say he thought I needed company, just stated facts. His leg hurt. I had space. It made sense. "Couch goes there, dresser by the window," I asked, carrying one of his suitcases upstairs. "Sounds right," he said. We spent the afternoon moving furniture around. The old couch from the basement, the dresser from the attic that had been Lorraine's mother's. Clyde moved slowly, favoring his bad leg. I moved carefully, still learning the limits of a body that had survived 18 months of poison. 2 men in their 60s hauling furniture, saying almost nothing. The gift wasn't in the gesture itself. It was in what Clyde's practical necessity revealed after everything. Lorraine's death, Colt's betrayal, 18 months of slow murder. The most healing thing in my life turned out to be someone who arrived without drama and stayed without needing credit for it. Clyde's unsentimental move became the anchor I hadn't known I was missing. Stability that asked for nothing and offered everything simply by being there. By 4 o'clock, the room was ready. Clyde's clothes in the dresser, his toiletries in the bathroom, his reading glasses on the nightstand. He tested the mattress and nodded once. "Good enough," he said. That night we made dinner together. Not a celebration, nothing special, just canned chicken noodle soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. Clyde found the soup in the pantry. I buttered the bread. We moved around each other in the kitchen, with the ease of 2 people who'd known each other long enough to understand spacing and rhythm. We ate at 6:30 with the evening news on. The taste was simple warm broth and noodles, toasted bread with melted cheese. The sounds were spoons against bowls, the low murmur of the television, covering weather and local politics. Clyde sat across from me, and we didn't talk about Colt or Nadine or the trial. We talked about whether the Knicks had a chance this season and whether the January snow predictions would hold. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. That's why it worked. No careful navigation of trauma, no therapy language about processing or healing. Just 2 old men eating soup and watching basketball highlights the kitchen, warm from the stove. December darkness pressing against the windows. And now Clyde lived in my spare bedroom, and we ate soup together and argued about whether the referee's call in the fourth quarter had been fair. The healing wasn't in grand gestures or emotional declarations. It was in this routine normality, the unremarkable rhythm of two people sharing a house, someone to eat dinner with, someone to say good morning to, someone who understood that I needed company without needing me to perform gratitude for it. "More soup?" Clyde asked, pushing back from the table to clear the bowls. "I'm good," I said. He washed the dishes. I dried them. The kitchen smelled like dish soap and coffee. Clyde had started a pot brewing. Outside, snow fell in light flakes that caught in the glow of the porch light. Inside, the house felt different. Not happier exactly, not healed, just occupied, inhabited by something other than grief and anger and the ghost of betrayal. Clyde poured coffee into 2 mugs, blue for him, green for me, and we sat back down. He added sugar to his. I drank mine black. The television had moved on to a car insurance commercial. "Colt been calling?" Clyde asked. "Every Thursday," I said. Clyde nodded. He didn't ask what we talked about or whether I'd forgiven him or what might happen next. Just acknowledged the fact and moved on. Friendship at 60 looks like a spare toothbrush in the bathroom and an extra chair at the table. It looks like someone who knows when to ask and when to stay quiet. It looks like rearranging furniture on a Saturday and eating canned soup and watching basketball without having to discuss the full weight of everything that's happened. It looks like Clyde's truck in the driveway every morning instead of every few days. 2 coffee mugs instead of 1. Survival that doesn't require witness or applause. A quiet, unspoken understanding that some wounds don't close, but the bleeding can at least be stopped. Clyde never brought up the trial, and he didn't reach for the hollow reassurances people usually offer when a family falls apart. Instead, he filled the silence with ordinary things. When he noticed the back screen door was catching on the frame, a minor annoyance I'd ignored for 6 months. While my body was fading, he limped out to his truck, came back with a worn WD-40 can and a stubby screwdriver, and fixed it without a word. The clean metallic click of the latch finally seating properly felt like the first piece of my shattered life sliding back into place. Having another person in the house changed the physics of every room. The echoing stillness that had defined this red brick house since Lorraine passed was replaced by something solid, grounded, and reassuringly predictable. I started looking forward to the smell of morning coffee that hadn't come from my own hands, and the steady thud of his work boots crossing the hallway carpet at dawn. We built something fragile but unyielding inside the walls of my past trauma. On rainy afternoons, we'd sit on the covered porch watching water collect along the edge of the dormant garden, sharing nothing but an old thermos of black tea and the quiet comfort of knowing we'd both stared into a dark place and come back from it. He didn't try to be a savior, and I didn't have to carry the exhausting weight of playing victim. We were just 2 retired men who understood the value of a steady pace holding the line together against the December cold. That first night after the dishes were done, Clyde went upstairs to his new room, and I stayed in the kitchen a while longer. The house was quiet, but not empty. I could hear him moving around up there, the creak of floorboards, a drawer sliding open, the distant rush of water in the bathroom sink. I thought about Lorraine, about how she'd always liked a full house, how she'd said the quiet after Colt moved out had felt too loud, how she would have liked having Clyde here, would have put fresh flowers in his room, and made a proper welcome dinner instead of canned soup. But Lorraine wasn't here, and Clyde wasn't a house guest, and the canned soup had been exactly right. He didn't make it sentimental. He didn't say he was moving in to keep me company, or because he was worried, or because he thought I shouldn't be alone. He just said the driving was hard on his leg and the room was sitting empty anyway. That's the thing about 28 years. It doesn't need decoration. That's what real friendship looks like when you're 60 and everything else has fallen apart. No drama, no sentiment, just presence. 9 o'clock Monday evening, the first one after Clyde moved in. I sat in the living room looking at the front door. Clyde was in the kitchen. I could hear him filling the kettle, the click of the stove, igniting the small domestic sounds of someone making tea. Outside, the December night was dark and cold. The porch light cast its familiar yellow glow across the front steps. I watched the door and waited for the doorbell that wouldn't ring. For 18 months, 9 o'clock Monday evening had meant one thing: Nadine's arrival, the sound of her car in the driveway, her footsteps on the porch, the doorbell's 2-note chime, her voice saying something cheerful about traffic or weather, while she carried Tupperware containers into my kitchen. For 18 months, I'd opened that door, and welcome my own slow murder without knowing it. Now it was 9 o'clock on a Monday, and the doorbell stayed silent. I sat for 3 minutes long enough to feel the absence to mark the moment. The revelation wasn't dramatic. It was this. The doorbell didn't ring. After 18 months of Monday evenings at 9 p.m., after 18 months of diuretics delivered with a smile, the pattern had finally broken. This was the first Monday night of a different life, one where I wasn't waiting to be poisoned, wasn't performing gratitude for my own execution. Clyde came into the living room carrying 2 teacups. He didn't ask what I was doing or why I was sitting in the dark staring at the front door. Just set 1 cup on the table beside me and lowered himself into the chair opposite his bad leg extended carefully. "Tea's ready," he said. We drank in silence. The chamomile was too hot at first, then settling into warmth. The taste was floral and honey. Clyde had remembered I took honey in my evening tea. The living room smelled like steam and tea leaves and the faint pine scent from the small Christmas tree Clyde had insisted we put up that afternoon. Outside, the street was quiet. No car engines, no footsteps, no doorbell. Just a Monday evening in December with 2 old men drinking tea. "First one?" Clyde said after a while. "Yeah," I said. He didn't ask if I was okay or whether I wanted to talk about it. We just sat there until the tea was gone and the clock on the mantel read 9:15. Then Clyde collected the cups and went back to the kitchen, and I sat a few more minutes before following him. The doorbell didn't ring. The street stayed quiet. Monday at 9 p.m. had become just another hour instead of a scheduled attempt on my life. Tuesday morning, I woke to birdsong, and Clyde already making coffee downstairs. I got up, took my medication, the real kind, from the pharmacy in a properly labeled bottle that Clyde had picked up and counted out, and watched me take and went to the kitchen. Clyde poured me coffee in the green mug. I drank it black, standing at the window, looking out at the backyard. Lorraine's garden was still there. The tomatoes we'd planted in spring had borne fruit through summer and into fall. The herbs were mostly dormant now, the rosemary still green, but the basil long gone to frost. The roses were bare stalks waiting for spring. I put on my coat and went outside. The morning air was cold and clean, the kind of December cold that wakes you up completely. The sun was just clearing the tree line, throwing golden light across the frost-touched grass. My breath came out in visible clouds. I picked up the watering can from beside the back door and filled it from the spigot, the water shockingly cold against my fingers. I moved through the garden, slowly watering what needed it, checking the protective covers Clyde and I had laid over the more delicate plants. My boots left prints in the frost. The smell was earth and cold air, and the faint evergreen scent of pine mulch. I thought about 18 months of Monday nights, about the pills Nadine had been adding to my medication, about Clyde's aching leg, and the late-night discovery that had ultimately saved my life, about Colt in his treatment center saying some days better than others and meaning it, about Detective Staley, the evidence bags, the courtroom, where I had learned in full detail how my daughter-in-law had tried to kill me, about Lorraine, who had planted this garden and loved it and never got to see it to bear fruit one final time. The garden didn't care about the betrayal. The tomatoes grew. The herbs flourished. The roses simply waited for the next spring. Nature keeps moving forward if you tend to it. I stood in the December sunlight and finished my work. My hands were cold and slightly stiff. The lingering effects of the diuretics, the neurologist said, might never fully fade, but they worked well enough to hold a watering can and care for the plants my wife had loved. Inside, Clyde was making breakfast toast eggs, fresh coffee. Later, maybe Colt would call from the treatment center for our weekly Thursday conversation. We were learning to exist without guarantees, navigating our broken relationship one careful step at a time. The story doesn't end with a perfect Hollywood resolution. It ends here in a quiet Tulsa backyard, with a 68-year-old man breathing the clean winter air, choosing survival and continuation over bitterness. Some mornings, that quiet is more than enough. He was my son, and I had loved him completely. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Truly, this story asked a lot of both of us. Looking back, what strikes me most is how long harm can wear the face of love. 18 months of Monday evenings. 18 months of a son walking through my door, hugging me, telling me he loved me, while the pills in my organizer were being swapped one by one. It cost me my savings, my health, very nearly my life, and something in my relationship with my son that will never be fully the same. I believe God kept me here for a reason, and I think part of that reason is this, that what happened to me shouldn't happen in silence. These are the things I'd tell any father, any parent, anyone who thinks love is enough to keep them safe. If someone's concern always arrives on a schedule and leaves the moment they've checked a certain room, pay attention to the pattern, not just the kindness. Trust your instincts about your own body. Fatigue and confusion are not just aging. Ask the questions. Get the second opinion. Never let affection be the reason you stop asking where your money is. Love and accountability can exist in the same house. If you sense something is wrong, document quietly before you confront. Evidence speaks when emotion cannot. These are hard lessons. They come from a hard story. But father stories like this one, quiet, domestic, devastating, are more common than anyone wants to admit. And dad's revenge in my case wasn't anger. It was patience. It was preparation. It was refusing to disappear without a fight. If this story reached something in, you leave a comment below and tell me what you're thinking. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, a parent, a sibling, a friend living alone, please share it with them. It costs you nothing, and it might mean everything to them. And if you haven't already subscribed to His Hidden Revenge, there are more stories here that deserve to be told. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.